The first thing she packed wasn't her clothes. It was the coffee mug I'd given her on our second anniversary. The stupid white one that said home is wherever we're together. She wrapped it carefully in newspaper while pretending not to notice I was standing in the doorway. "I think I want to start over," she said without looking at me. I actually smiled because I thought she meant we needed a vacation or therapy. We'd been stressed for months. Wedding planning, work, my father's health. Life had become a checklist instead of something we enjoyed. "Yeah," I answered. "Maybe we both do." She finally looked up. "No," she whispered. "I want to start over, without you." I wish I could say I reacted dramatically. That I screamed or threw something. Instead, I laughed. A confused, ugly laugh that sounded completely foreign to me. I honestly believed she was joking. 3 weeks earlier we'd been arguing over flower arrangements and whether my niece should be the flower girl. We had deposits on the venue, invitations waiting to be mailed, and a refrigerator covered with color samples and seating charts. We were ordinary. Or at least I thought we were. The terrifying thing about losing everything isn't the moment it happens. It's realizing the disaster started long before you noticed the smoke. Looking back, the warning signs seem almost insulting in how obvious they were. She started protecting her phone like it contained state secrets. If I walked into the room, the screen flipped over. If it buzzed after midnight, she'd say it was just work, even though she hated talking about work outside the office. I noticed she smiled differently at messages. Not the warm smile she gave me when I sent something stupid, but the distracted kind that made her forget I was even sitting beside her. When I asked if everything was okay, she kissed my forehead and told me I was imagining problems because of the wedding stress. And I believed her. I'd always trusted her completely. We had been together long enough that I thought trust was automatic, something that couldn't simply disappear overnight. My sister quietly asked if everything between us was alright because my fiancé seemed distant at a family barbecue. I defended her immediately. "She's exhausted," I said. "Planning a wedding is a full-time job." My sister nodded, but her expression lingered in my mind much longer than I admitted. I ignored it anyway. Trust felt easier than asking questions I wasn't ready to hear. The first crack appeared because of something ridiculously small. One Saturday morning, she left her smartwatch on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs to shower. I wasn't trying to snoop. I was making coffee when the screen lit up with a message. "Last night meant everything to me. I can't keep pretending." I froze. The sender's name wasn't saved. Just a phone number. A few seconds later, another message appeared. "Have you told him yet?" I stared at the screen until it went dark. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. For several minutes I convinced myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was meant for someone else. Maybe a coworker was going through a breakup. Maybe I was connecting dots that didn't belong together. When she came downstairs, smiling and drying her hair with a towel, I almost said something. Instead, I handed her a cup of coffee and acted normal. That was the longest breakfast of my life. She chatted about catering and playlists while I could barely swallow a single bite. For the first time since we'd met, I looked at the woman I loved and wondered if I actually knew her at all. I spent the next few days trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. Then the little lies started piling up. She said she was staying late at work, but her office was dark when I drove past on my way home from visiting my dad. She claimed she had lunch alone, yet I noticed the charge for a restaurant expensive enough that she never would have gone there by herself. None of it was proof. Just enough to keep me awake every night. I hated the person I was becoming. Every notification made me flinch. Every delayed reply felt suspicious. I started memorizing her routines without even realizing it. One Thursday evening she came home wearing a perfume she hadn't worn in years. When I hugged her, I caught a faint scent of men's cologne mixed with it. "Who's been hugging you?" I asked with an awkward laugh. She stepped back almost immediately. "Seriously?" You're interrogating me now? The conversation ended there, but something had shifted between us. For the first time, she looked at me less like the man she planned to marry and more like an obstacle standing in the way of whatever future she had already begun imagining. Everything finally unraveled because she forgot her laptop at home. She called me in a panic while I was working remotely. Can you bring it to my office? I have a presentation in 20 minutes. I grabbed the laptop, but before leaving, I opened it to check whether it needed charging. The screen was already awake. Her email was open. I know I should have looked away. Instead, my eyes landed on a draft that hadn't been sent. The subject line read, "After I leave him." My stomach dropped. I clicked it. The email wasn't addressed to a friend. It was addressed to a man named Daniel. She wrote that she couldn't keep lying to me, that she was terrified of hurting me, but she couldn't marry someone she no longer loved. She apologized for making him wait and promised that, after the wedding was officially cancelled, they could finally stop hiding. Near the end, she wrote one sentence that hurt more than everything else. I should have ended it months ago, but I didn't know how to destroy someone who never deserved this. I read it 3 times before realizing my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the laptop. I didn't wait for her to come home. I drove straight to her office with the laptop sitting on the passenger seat like it weighed 100 pounds. The entire drive I rehearsed different versions of the conversation. In one, she admitted everything immediately. In another, there was some unbelievable explanation that made all of this make sense. Reality was much uglier. She met me in the lobby with a relieved smile. "You saved me," she said, reaching for the laptop. I didn't let go. "Who's Daniel?" Her smile disappeared so fast it was terrifying. She looked around at her co-workers, then quietly said, "Not here." "No," I replied. "Right here." For several seconds she just stared at me. Then she closed her eyes. "You read it." It wasn't a question. I did. She took a slow breath before whispering words that still echo in my head. "I never meant for you to find out like this. It's not true. Not you're mistaken. Just an apology for the way I discovered the truth." That was the moment I knew there was nothing left to save. We sat in my car because neither of us wanted an audience. For almost a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. "How long?" She kept staring through the windshield. "About 8 months. 8 months. We had spent those 8 months choosing a venue, tasting cakes, meeting photographers, and talking about children. Every memory suddenly split into 2 versions, the one I lived and the one she secretly lived beside it. "Did you ever love me?" I asked. She immediately started crying. "I did. I still care about you." "That's not what I asked." She covered her face with both hands. "I loved you, but somewhere along the way I stopped feeling like your partner. Then I met Daniel. The name alone made my chest tighten. So every time you kissed me, every time you told me you couldn't wait to marry me. I was trying to convince myself," she whispered. Those words hurt even more than the affair itself. Because they meant our engagement hadn't been built on lies from the beginning. It had slowly turned into one while I was too blind to notice. I asked her the question I had been avoiding since this nightmare began. "Did you sleep with him?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt endless. When she finally nodded, I felt something inside me collapse. Not explode. Not shatter. Collapse. Like a building whose foundation had been quietly eaten away for years. "It only happened after I realized I couldn't marry you," she said, as if the timeline somehow mattered. I laughed bitterly. "So cheating became your way of confirming the relationship was over?" She wiped away her tears. "I know how horrible that sounds." "You don't know," I replied. "Because you're not the one hearing it." She reached for my hand. I pulled it away before she could touch me. I never wanted to hurt you. I looked at the woman I'd planned to spend my life with and realized she truly believed that sentence. That was the cruelest part. She wasn't trying to be evil. She had simply decided her happiness mattered more than my trust, and she convinced herself that made the damage somehow unavoidable. The fallout spread faster than I expected. By the next morning, both of our families knew the wedding was off. Nobody knew why. She wanted to tell everyone we had grown apart. She said it would be kinder and would spare both families unnecessary drama. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You want me to help protect your reputation? She lowered her eyes. I don't want people to hate me. I stared at her for several seconds before answering. You should have thought about that before you cheated. Her mother called me that afternoon, crying so hard I could barely understand her. She kept asking what had happened, insisting there had to be some misunderstanding. I told her the truth. Every single word. By evening my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Some relatives were angry on my behalf. Others begged me to forgive her because everyone makes mistakes. I hated that phrase. Forgetting an anniversary is a mistake. Buying the wrong wedding rings is a mistake. Building a second relationship while planning a wedding isn't a mistake. It's a series of choices made over and over again until someone else's future is destroyed. A week after everything came out, she asked if we could meet one last time. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at the small park where I had proposed 2 years earlier. I almost laughed at the irony. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were swollen, and she held the engagement ring in a small velvet box. I wanted to give this back in person, she said. I didn't reach for it. It doesn't belong to me anymore. She placed it on the bench between us. I've been seeing a therapist, she said quietly. I'm trying to understand why I handled everything so badly. I nodded without saying anything. I know you think I left because of Daniel, she continued. The truth is, I had already checked out of our relationship. I just didn't have the courage to admit it. Then why accept my proposal? Her face crumpled. Because I kept hoping my feelings would come back. I looked away. So I was your backup plan. Your experiment. She started crying again. No. But she couldn't explain how it was anything else, and that silence answered the question better than words ever could. 4 months after she left, I couldn't escape her. Not physically. Emotionally. Every room in the apartment carried some version of us. The couch where we binge-watched terrible reality shows. The kitchen where we danced while making dinner. The hallway where she'd leave little sticky notes telling me to have a good day. I packed everything into boxes, convinced it would help. It didn't. The silence became louder than the memories. Sleep turned into something I negotiated with instead of something that happened naturally. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning replaying every conversation from the last year, searching for the exact moment I lost her. My friends kept inviting me out. I usually made excuses. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of pretending to be okay. The hardest part wasn't accepting that she'd chosen someone else. It was accepting that, while I had been planning our future with complete certainty, she had been grieving the relationship in secret. By the time she finally ended it, she'd already had months to move on. I was standing at the starting line of heartbreak while she was already halfway to a new life. About 6 months later, I ran into her completely by accident. I was in a grocery store, comparing coffee beans, when I heard someone quietly say my name. I turned around. She looked different. Not happier exactly, just lighter. Like she'd put down a heavy backpack I'd never realized she was carrying. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she asked, "How have you been?" I almost laughed. How do you answer a question like that? I get through the days, I said honestly. She nodded as if she understood. I heard you're seeing a counselor. I am. I'm glad. There was an awkward silence before she admitted that she and Daniel were living together. I expected the news to crush me. Instead, it just made me tired. "I hope you don't hate me forever," she whispered. I thought about all the nights I'd spent blaming myself, wondering what I could have done differently. "I don't hate you," I finally said. "I just wish you'd been honest before you asked me to build a future around promises you already knew you couldn't keep." She started crying again, but this time I didn't stay to comfort her. I simply walked away. People assume heartbreak has a clear ending. It doesn't. It changes shape. At first, the pain was loud. Every morning started with the same crushing realization that the life I'd imagined no longer existed. Then it became quieter, slipping into ordinary moments when I least expected it. A wedding invitation in the mail. A couple arguing over paint colors at a hardware store. A song she used to sing while cleaning the apartment. Those things stopped me in my tracks. The hardest battle wasn't with her anymore. It was with myself. I kept wondering whether I'd ignored too many signs because I loved her, or because I was terrified of being alone. I replayed every conversation, every canceled date, every distracted smile, trying to figure out where hope had turned into denial. My therapist asked me a question that stayed with me. If she had told you the truth the first time she fell out of love, would you have hated her? I answered immediately. No. Then he asked, "So what do you actually resent?" That one took me weeks to answer. It wasn't losing her. It was losing the chance to say goodbye to the relationship while it was still honest. It's been a few years now, and my life looks completely different. I eventually moved to another apartment because I couldn't keep treating every corner of the old place like a crime scene. I changed jobs, started traveling more, and slowly rebuilt friendships I'd neglected while planning a wedding that never happened. People tell me I seem calmer. Maybe I am. But healing isn't the same as forgetting. Every now and then someone asks why I never got married, and I usually give a short answer. Things didn't work out. It's easier than explaining how someone can stand beside you, hold your hand, promise forever, and still be planning an exit you know nothing about. I heard through mutual friends that she and Daniel are still together. Strangely, that doesn't bother me anymore. If anything, I'm relieved they didn't destroy my future only to fall apart a few months later. That would have made all of this feel even more meaningless. Instead, I've accepted something I fought for a long time. She didn't choose him because I wasn't enough. She chose a different life. She just lacked the courage to tell me before it was too late. I still think about that sentence sometimes. I want to start over, without you. For a long time, I heard it as proof that I had failed. That if I'd been more attentive, more romantic, less busy with work or family, maybe she would have stayed. I don't believe that anymore. Relationships end. Feelings change. None of that is unique. What broke me wasn't that she fell out of love. It was that she let me keep living inside a future she had already abandoned. She watched me pay deposits, make plans, and dream out loud while she quietly built another relationship behind my back. That's the part one still struggle to forgive. If anyone reading this is staying with someone out of guilt, fear, or habit, don't do what she did. The truth will hurt. Waiting usually hurts even more. As for me, I'm finally dating again. Slowly. Carefully. Trust doesn't come as easily as it once did, and maybe it never will. But I'd rather risk loving an honest person than spend another day believing a beautiful lie. And if she ever wonders whether I recovered, the answer is yes. Just not as the man she left behind.